In 2007, Six Flags started embracing their identity as the discount chain. The days of the monster custom B&M coasters was over. No more Stratocoasters, no more Intamin prefabricated wooden coasters. They were going into bankruptcy and had to rethink their business model. They emerged as the chain of small clone coasters, flat rides, and lucky for enthusiasts, RMC conversions, which were also a bargain. For a decade from the mid-90s to the mid-2000s, Six Flags was ambitious, probably overly ambitious. But prior to that decade, they had another program that was more in line with their new discount chain identity. They thought that they could invest in a handful of portable rides and move them around every few years to introduce a new ride to each park without a massive investment. Which rides were involved, where did they end up, and why did the program stop? This is the legacy of the Six Flags Ride Rotation Program. The first coaster that was built maybe wasn't originally part of the ride rotation plan, as it debuted at Six Flags St. Louis in 1981. This was Jetstream, a Schwarzkopf looping star. You can still find a model like this at Frontier City with Silver Bullet. After 8 seasons at Six Flags St. Louis, the chain relocated it to Astroworld and it would reopen for the 1989 season as Viper. It would be given a tunnel for the first drop, and it would operate for 16 years before being closed down with the park in 2005. It was never relocated. In 1984, the Sarajevo bobsleds came to Six Flags Magic Mountain, an Intamin bobsled that was popular that year, with 3 opening, one at Six Flags Great Adventure, one at Opryland USA, and one at Magic Mountain. This was themed to the 1984 Winter Olympics, which were held in Sarajevo, Yugoslavia, and it was meant to simulate the bobsled event as the train rolled through the track without actually being attached. After just 2 seasons, it was given to Six Flags Over Texas and operated under the name Avalanche from 1987 to 1994. This was in the Mexico section of the park, so it was eventually given the name La Víbora, which is Spanish for the Viper, and it was painted yellow, black, and red like a snake. And it's been operating at the park for over 30 years. Six Flags decided that one relocation was enough. I mentioned the Great Adventure Bobsled, and that also opened in 1984 with the name Sarajevo Bobsled. This lasted at its original park a lot longer than Magic Mountains. It operated until 1988 before being relocated to Six Flags Great America and assuming the name Rolling Thunder. If you've ever heard the sled roll through the track, you'll know why this name is appropriate. This operated until 1995 when Great America started building the Southwest Territory, and it was in storage for 2 years before being moved to the Great Escape as Alpine Bobsled for the 1998 season. You can still ride this classic Intamin bobsled today. After the Sarajevo bobsleds left Magic Mountain, that plot of land was in need of another coaster, and they got it with the addition of Shockwave, an Intamin stand-up coaster. The bobsleds left in 1985, and Shockwave was right there to replace it for the 1986 season. Like the bobsleds that preceded it, Shockwave was the first coaster of its kind that Intamin produced, and it would be one of just 3 stand-up coasters from the Swiss manufacturer. This did not get a lot of love from the people who rode it, and it only lasted at Magic Mountain for 3 seasons. It was then moved to Great Adventure, and it would serve 3 more seasons with the same name. It was dismantled in 1992 and moved to Six Flags Astroworld for the 1993 season under a new name, Batman the Escape. It served 3 years at its first 2 locations, but it found a home at Astroworld for 12 years. Just like the Schwarzkopf looping star, Viper, which I talked about earlier, Batman the Escape would meet its demise when Astroworld closed in 2005. The track would be moved to Six Flags Darien Lake after its removal, but it would never be built. In 1985, Intamin was added again with a brand new concept that Six Flags would adopt, this being by far their worst one. This was their Space Diver model, a compact and portable model that would focus on hairpin turns, and this was a real headbanger. They only built one of these, and it spread around the country to torture everyone. It started its life as Z-Force at Six Flags Great America, and it would serve 3 seasons between 1985 and 1987. It continued its run at Six Flags Over Georgia for 3 more seasons, also as Z-Force, from 1988 to 1990. It finally found its home at Magic Mountain for the 1992 season, and would operate for 11 years. In 1995, Hurricane Harbor was built right next to Flashback, so the park decided not to run it during the summer months. It would still be open in the off-season, but after the summer of 2003, it never reopened. It stood there dormant for 4 years before being demolished in 2007. Finally, Possibly the most regrettable model to be removed as part of the ride rotation program was the Togo Ultra Twister. You have to go to Japan to ride one of these unique models nowadays, but there used to be one right here in the States. It stands in a perfectly straight line, features a vertical lift and a steep drop, forward and backward sections, and inline twists within its tubular track. It made its American debut at Six Flags Great Adventure in 1986, and it was removed after 3 seasons, popping back up at Six Flags Astro World in 1990 and serving another solid 15 years before meeting its demise when the park closed in 2005. Just like the Looping Star Viper, and just like the Intamin stand-up coaster Batman the Escape, Astro World was truly where these ride rotation coasters went to die. The track was dismantled and moved to Six Flags America, but it was never reconstructed. So based on these 6 coasters, the ride rotation program seems to have officially been in place starting in 1984 when Six Flags started building coasters with a 3-year timeline, and their last new coaster built for this program came in 1986. This is a short 3-year window, but they did continue to move rides around in the early 90s. Shockwave's removal from Great Adventure in 1992 was really the last straw of the program. I know that Rolling Thunder was taken out of Great America in 1995, but given the fact that it operated for not 3, but 7 seasons, it makes me think that Six Flags made the decision to keep the coaster at the park until construction of the Southwest Territory forced their hand to remove it and give it to another park that could use it. It was an interesting experiment that centered around the chain's largest market parks: Great Adventure, Magic Mountain, Great America, and Astro World. These 4 parks represent the 4 largest cities in the country: New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, and Houston. Granted, Six Flags only owned a handful of parks in the mid-80s, but their 3 original parks that they built from the ground up weren't as involved in the program: Over Texas, St. Louis, and Over Georgia. Between 1984 and 1986, there was only one coaster the chain added that was not part of this program, that being Exhilarate at Astro World in 1984. This was an aero-suspended coaster that seems relocatable, especially given its flat plot of land, but none of the aero-suspended coasters have ever been relocated, so maybe it's not that easy. After 1986, Six Flags investments were a little different. In 1988, they installed Ninja at Magic Mountain, a terrain-suspended coaster that was specifically built for the land that it was on, starting at the top of the mountain and ending at the bottom. They also put in the first of 3 mega aero loopers, starting with Shockwave at Great America, a 170-foot-tall 7-inversion monster. 1989 saw a relocated coaster coming to Six Flags St. Louis. Ninja started its life at the Expo 86 in Vancouver before Six Flags acquired it, and they also built the second of the mega loopers, Great American Scream Machine at Great Adventure. In 1990, Six Flags ordered the first ever B&M, the stand-up coaster Iron Wolf for Great America, as well as the wooden coaster Georgia Cyclone for Over Georgia, and the third and final Aero Mega Looper, this one being the biggest of them all, Viper at Magic Mountain. Even though these coasters could be relocated, and Iron Wolf was relocated, they were not built with that intention. So even though they continued to move these 6 coasters around through the early 90s, they pulled the plug on the strategy of ordering portable coasters pretty quickly, just 2 years after it started. What could have caused this? With coasters improving through the mid to late 80s, perhaps Six Flags realized that the rides that were compatible for the program were subpar in terms of quality. Perhaps they underestimated the effort and expense of building and removing and rebuilding coasters every few years at each park. Perhaps they realized that taking rides apart and putting them back together was slowly deteriorating the quality of the rides and causing them to be rougher. It's interesting that right after the first relocation in 1986, that being Magic Mountain Sarajevo Bobsled to Over Texas, they stopped ordering new coasters that would take part in the program. It's possible that they realized with that first relocation how much of a pain it would be, and it wouldn't be a sustainable strategy. Or maybe it was a short-term plan that they put in motion to try for a few years, just to get a few coasters into the rotation, but it was never meant to be the wave of the future. There's no confirmation of the business strategy 30+ years ago, but we can speculate. Six Flags is no stranger to relocating its rides, even over the last 30 years. A lot of these relocations make sense. They came from parks that were no longer operating. Six Flags Kentucky Kingdom closed after the 2009 season, and a couple of parks harvested their coasters to open in 2011. The Wild Mouse Roadrunner Express was moved to Six Flags New England and would be reborn as Gotham City Gauntlet. The B&M stand-up coaster, Chang, was moved to Six Flags Great Adventure, where it's now known as Green Lantern. Hurricane Katrina put an end to the short life of Six Flags New Orleans in the summer of 2005, and some of their coasters were salvaged. Roadrunner Express is a Vekoma family coaster that found a new home at Magic Mountain for the 2011 season. Batman the Ride was a B&M Batclone that made its way west to Fiesta, Texas, to reopen as Goliath for the 2008 season. 2 months after the closure of Six Flags New Orleans, Astroworld in Houston was permanently shut down. Not much of this park was salvaged. Mayan Mindbender was moved across the state to Amarillo's Wonderland and is now known as Hornet. But in terms of relocating rides within the chain, the only one that was rebuilt and operating was their Vekoma SLC, Serial Thriller. It's now at La Ronde as Ednor. It seems like a majority of their relocations, especially recently, are done to move less popular rides out of their bigger parks in order to put cheap investments into their smaller parks. For example, Six Flags Great America fed Six Flags America 2 coasters within a 3-year span. Their B&M stand-up Iron Wolf would become Apocalypse in 2012, and their Zamperla Spinning Mouse, Raging Cajun, would keep its same name and arrive at Six Flags America in 2014. So Six Flags America gets hand-me-downs, and Great America gets the RMC that broke the height and speed record for wooden coasters, as well as the SNS Launch Coaster that claims the fastest acceleration in North America. We saw a similar trend with Magic Mountain moving its Deja Vu over to New England for 2012, reopening as Goliath, as well as Green Lantern moving to La Ronde this year to open as Vipere. Six Flags Over Texas had a boomerang named Flashback that was moved to Six Flags St. Louis in 2013. This land is now being used for a Zamperla Giant Discovery and an SNS Freespin. But we also saw this in the early 90s. Great Adventure had a pair of interlocking Arrow shuttle loops, and these were relocated in 1993. One went to Frontier City as Diamondback, and the other went to Six Flags America as Python. There are a few other relocations over the years that don't follow a specific pattern, but it all leads back to the conclusion that Six Flags likes to use this method to shuffle the deck and give an old ride some new scenery where it could be more appreciated. In a future video, I'll look at what coasters make the most sense to be relocated into a different park. This is not a strategy that Cedar Fair uses. The one example was moving California's Great America's Invertigo to Dorney Park in 2012. Great America also had their flying coaster, Stealth, go to Carowinds in 2004, but that was back when those parks were run by Paramount. The rest of the relocated rides came from Geauga Lake, which closed down in 2007. Dominator moved to King's Dominion, Steel Venom moved to Dorney Park as Voodoo, and now is Possessed. Thunderhawk moved to Michigan's Adventure, and Headspin moved to Carowinds as Carolina Cobra. X-Flight actually checked out a year early, closing in 2006 to go to Kings Island as Firehawk. Maybe it saw the writing on the wall. Who knows? So that's the story of the short-lived Six Flags ride rotation program. Let me know if you've ridden any of these 6 coasters and what you thought of them, and if you may have been lucky to ride them in multiple locations. There are 2 still operating, which are both of the bobsleds, and I've already ridden La Vibora, but I should be able to get on Alpine Bobsled this summer. The others are unfortunately on the scrap heap. That's all for now. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.